I'm going to wade through multiple layers of propaganda with this next one. This is an opinion piece from The Guardian that really caught my eye because there's just lots of cringe in the headline. But again, there's multiple layers here, right? And this is an opinion piece on COVID in China. So you know COVID, a situation where most people fucking stupid when it comes to China. Another thing that people, when they discuss, just their brain leaks out their ears, right? So this ought to be good. Xi's iron grip on his country is stopping the COVID U-turn it so desperately needs. What? By Isabel Hilton. Never heard of this person, but chances are they may qualify for the Stupid Fucking Dumbass Awards of 2022. Now again, real quick before I go into this, is the Chinese government perfect? No, the Chinese government, let's be honest, pretty fucking bad. Pretty fucking bad. But when it comes to COVID, they are better than the United States of America's government. I'm sorry. That's what I think. But that doesn't mean China's government is good. That doesn't mean China's COVID policy is perfect. On COVID, they got some pretty fucking stupid policies too. But as a whole, when you account for all things being considered, I think China's COVID policy is much better than the Western COVID policy of, I hope it goes away. I hope it goes away. Oh, my grandma died. I hope it goes away. Oh, my son died. Oh, please, virus, go away. Oh, I'm going to go to a concert next week. There's going to be 5,000 people. No. Oh, my dog died. Oh, please go away, COVID, please. That's the Western COVID policy. So, hey, I'm not going to lie. We got to call it like it is. China, not looking so bad from where I'm sitting. But again, they're looking pretty fucking bad too. So, again, multiple layers of propaganda here. Last week, COVID-related images provoked outrage on Chinese social media. One showed a young woman kneeling on the ground with her hands tied behind her back after she and a friend had picked up a takeaway meal without first donning masks. Now, I just want to say this much. I agree with this. So far, I'm in. So far, so good. I'm moving to China. So far. Neither had COVID, neither was even a close contact, but both had been detained by the increasingly resented Big Whites, the hazmat-suited zero-COVID enforcers who bound the women's hands and left them kneeling in the street in exercise and humiliation that provoked indignation among China's netizens. Now again, I'm fine with this. I am. Provided masks are free, available. You can get as many as you want, as many as you need, right? And you can get things that you need. If you're locked in your apartment and you have no food, you'll die of starvation. That is not a successful system. If you are locked in your apartment and the government will deliver food to you, or you're allowed to go get food, but the government supplies, PPE, masks, that kind of stuff, that's a good fucking system. So I'm just saying, I also gotta say this, provided the Chinese government and its enforcers don't actually hurt people, and I know for a fact that they are, right? That is a fact. I've seen videos of Chinese police officers acting incredibly unbelievable when it comes to human rights violations. I don't support that. I don't agree with that. But I do have no problem if someone doesn't wear a mask when they leave the house, tie him up, put him in that thing, the medieval thing where it's like they got their hands, You see that shit in hentai a lot. But anyway, meanwhile, Tian Zhisheng Community, a residential compound in the central city of Zhengzhou. I don't know how to pronounce these things. I'm trying my best. An actual cloud, 888. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Gained notoriety after recording a message broadcast by the management. After a recording of a message broadcast by the management company went viral. Quote, outsiders will be executed on the spot with the authority of law, it said. Now again, pretty fucking bad. Pretty fucking bad. That's bad. Don't execute motherfuckers. All right? I'm against execution. Now again, throwing him in the fucking weird thing, you know, whoa. Or like, you know, putting the dunce hat on him. You know, I'm all in favor. Throwing tomatoes at that dumb bitch. Have at it. Let's do it. Executing motherfuckers. I'm against it. I'm against executions. Hot take. I know. Hot take. Hot take. I'm anti-execution. This is a hot take, all right? I'm coming out of the woodwork here. I'm coming out of the woodwork to announce this. But executions, I am not in support of. Zhengzhou, already in the spotlight after a mass breakout from its giant Foxconn iPhone factory as desperate workers tried to escape an impending lockdown, is suffering one of China's larger COVID outbreaks. Now again, how the fuck are you going to have a zero COVID policy and still have factories? Is that possible? No. And again, once again, China is a capitalist nation. This is not a communist nation. Just because the guys call themselves communists doesn't mean they're communists. Republicans call themselves Republicans. Does it mean they're actually Republicans? Democrats call themselves Democrats. Does it mean they're actually Democrats? Right? No. People use these labels all the time. So, again, COVID is a serious issue. The Chinese government, in my opinion, overall, treats it much better than the United States government. That said, both governments, not so good. Not so good in that department. Beijing, Guangzhou, and several other cities are contributing to the highest COVID numbers in China since the first catastrophic outbreak in Wuhan in December 2019. On Wednesday last week, the daily total of cases reached a 2022 record of 31,527. Now again, it's interesting that we have a very specific number here. In the United States, we've essentially stopped counting. So, as far as I'm concerned, 31,000 versus theoretically in the millions? Hey, doing a lot better. Not only is popular resentment growing over Xi Jinping's zero COVID policy and the economic costs continuing to mount, but its efficacy appears to be breaking down. Really? 31,000 cases? Broken. In the United States, when we got 1 million cases a day, the CDC changed the fucking rules on case reporting and data reporting. There are several states in the United States that don't even track that shit. Florida, Idaho, they just stopped tracking almost entirely. Given the growing risks and diminishing returns, why does Beijing continue to insist on it? 2 years ago, it all looked rather different, despite today's signs of weariness and frustration. Zero COVID was hailed as an example of the superiority of China's system of government. It allowed the government to bury the memories of the bungling incompetence of the early response in Wuhan, the death from COVID of the whistleblower Dr. Li Wenjiang. I don't know quite about this situation that it's talking about. I'm not going to lie, so I don't know what that is. I've heard of it, but I can't tell you what the details are in that. So, but again, executions, cover-ups, not good. Transparency, good. Handling a pandemic, good. Trying to reduce death, good. But again, how is the government simultaneously going to say, oh yeah, we have no problem with executing people that go against our policy of trying to prevent people from dying? Now again, I also think that a lot of the claims that Chinese government officials are carrying out, like mass executions of people over COVID, I think that that's probably overblown. But also, it's not unlike Chinese government officials to carry out mass executions of certain populations. So again, it's interesting, something to consider, right? Beijing finally moved, imposing a severe 76-day lockdown in the entire province. Now again, to my knowledge, 76-day lockdown was not people starving in their apartment buildings. They had food delivery. They had medication delivery, things that I advocated for here in the United States. Severe. Now again, we are dealing with two layers of propaganda. One, anti-China propaganda. Two, anti-any COVID measurements at all propaganda. Right? These are two layers of propaganda we have to wade through. There's a lot of shit going on. By March 2020, it was judged politically and medically safe for Xi to visit Wuhan and conduct a slow-motion victory lap over the virus. By April, when the lockdown was finally lifted, zero COVID was hailed as a triumph. New cases had dried up and life could return to normal. By August, as the pandemic raged around the world, images of a mass bathing party in Wuhan, ground zero of the pandemic, showed tens of thousands of people crammed into a water park celebrating the summer with not a mask in sight. I remember those. Now again, think about this. If the whole world all at once followed China's lead on a quote-unquote severe 76-day lockdown, providing food to people's houses, providing pharmaceutical delivery, ensuring people did not have to go to work to pay rent. Now again, we need essential workers, we need food delivery people, and these people should be given, as much PPE as necessary, hazmat suits if they want, N95s, etc. Right? Then China would not be dealing with COVID right now. And no one else would either. If the whole world would have done what China did, we would all be having our summer swimming parties. We wouldn't have Omicron, Omicron 2, Omicron 3, Omicron 5. What is this, a fucking goddamn 1980s slasher franchise? How many times are we going to get a new strain of Omicron before the fucking WHO decides to revert their stupid fuck policy of not giving any new COVID variant names to reduce panic? When are we going to do that? I don't know, probably not. So we're going to have 12 fucking Omicrons. Eventually we're going to outpace the Friday the 13th franchise with that fucking shit. Severe lockdown, digital enforcement, and mass testing had restored social order and kept China's death rate low, even as Western democracies were struggling with the first and second waves of the pandemic, a time of mass deaths and incoherent policy responses. Even today, China has officially reported just over 5,000 COVID deaths. Now again, am I going to sit here and tell you that I believe China's COVID numbers? No. But I'm going to sit here and tell you I don't believe in any country's COVID numbers. Let's talk about Russia, for example. I don't believe in Russia's COVID numbers. I don't believe Brazil's COVID numbers. I don't believe India's COVID numbers. I don't believe a lot of European countries' COVID numbers. I certainly don't believe the United States' COVID numbers. But either way, if it is the case that only 5,000 people died all throughout China, the most populous country in the world, that's, again, on paper, that sounds like one of the most magnificent achievements in human history. But I don't believe it. For more than 2 years, zero COVID allowed an almost normal life to continue within its effectively closed borders, albeit a normality that might be interrupted by a positive test. Zero COVID allowed the government to insist that, unlike Western governments, it was keeping its people safe. The party cared, it said, in ways that liberal democracies manifestly did not. That is true. Thank you, Realon, for the gift memberships, by the way. But it was unnecessary. So just throwing that out there. Two developments changed that equation radically: the rapid development of effective vaccines in the West and the emergence of Omicron and other variants. Now again, Omicron pretty much only exists because of countries that did nothing to combat coronavirus. Let's be honest, let's be real. Okay? It's just the truth. China had developed vaccines and conducted mass vaccinations, but has not yet come up with a native mRNA vaccine and has declined to license a 4-in-1. Now, again, two prongs of stupidity. One, we should be living in a world where we share medicine. Two, China should fucking, whatever opportunity they need to go through, they should do what they have to do to protect its citizenry. So China's wrong, the United States is wrong, and the globe in the way that we share medicines instead, well, the way that we don't share medicines, but instead sell medicines that are life-saving, is ridiculous. Okay? So again, multiple prong, but China's wrong. Again, I'm not saying China's government is perfect, but I'm saying overall their COVID policy is significantly orders of magnitude better than the United States. That's what my claim is. The net result is that the vaccination program A is still less effective than it needs to be. The fear that the uncontrolled virus could swiftly overwhelm the country's limited medical provision was reinforced when an outbreak in March propelled Hong Kong briefly to the top of the global death rate league tables. Like China, Hong Kong has a large elderly population, many of whom had not been vaccinated. Omicron altered the game in a different way. The first and second waves of COVID were so dangerous, the extreme measures seemed proportionate. But the emergence of less lethal but highly transmissible variants, which spread rapidly and often infect people without symptoms, made the severe measures, the lockdowns, interruptions to production, authoritarian controls of every aspect of daily life seem out of proportion to the threat. Now again, here's where the other layer of propaganda comes in. The COVID denialism propaganda. Less lethal but highly transmissible? That's made up. They made it up. They just made it up. Omicron is quote-unquote less lethal than some of the other variants like Delta, but it is more lethal than the original COVID strain. And also, repeated infections are more likely with Omicron. So the more times you play the slot machine, the more opportunities you have to get the 3 sevens in a row. In this instance, that equates to death. So if you get COVID once with the original wild type version and you die, but you get Omicron and you survive, but you develop long COVID and then you get Omicron again and then you die, is that really that different? Now again, this is, I just saw this article and I was like, oh boy, I'm going to have a field day with this one. There are other signs of a teetering system since most cases are asymptomatic. Now again, is that true? Where's the verification that most COVID cases are asymptomatic now? And how do we define asymptomatic? Is brain fog asymptomatic? Is nausea asymptomatic? Or is the only symptom that we track a fever and sneezing and coughing? Seems to me like most people think asymptomatic is I don't have a fever and I'm not sneezing or coughing. But that's not what asymptomatic actually means. They are only detected by constant mass testing, which imposes a heavy burden for local authorities which bear the cost. The cost? Why would there be a cost for mass testing? Why wouldn't that be nationalized? Why wouldn't we, again, in this instance, I believe China is nationalized, but I'm talking about globally speaking. Why don't we share testing information? Why don't we share testing, patents so that we can mass produce the cheapest and most effective tests and then use them over and over and over again until COVID is gone? Because as a whole, the leaders of the world, the UN, the WHO, they don't actually give a fuck. The CDC in the US, they don't actually give a fuck. China at least claims to give a fuck. And in order to support their claim of giving a fuck, they do a couple good measures. like lockdowns, for example, masking, food delivery. Right now, again, I don't agree with Chinese government on a lot of things. I don't agree with a lot of the ways that they restrict people's, access to certain things in society. I don't agree with how they control people's lives in a lot of ways. Again, if you're under the age of 18, you can only play video games like once or twice a week or some shit. It's crazy shit, right? Again, that's just one example. I don't agree with a lot of China's authoritarian policies in the same way I don't agree with a lot of America's authoritarian policies. I don't. I'm against authoritarianism, but a lockdown is not authoritarianism. It's not. Saying, I'm going to pay you and give you free food and free drugs to sit at home and catch up on your favorite Netflix show, that's not authoritarianism. That's called public health. If someone walked up to you and said, I'm going to give you $5,000, stay at home 2 or 3 months, I'm going to give you a food cash stipend so that you can buy whatever food you want. Oh, you got medications? Don't worry, you're covered. That's not authoritarianism. That's called a vacation. That's called a good fucking time. That's called enjoying and making the best out of a bad situation. It is difficult to reverse policy in any political system, but it is perhaps hardest in a top-down authoritarian model. This may seem counterintuitive after all. Can't an authoritarian leader do whatever they like? Up to a point, several factors militate against an abrupt reversal of policy if the leader is strongly associated with it, as in this case, a U-turn implies failure. Something leaders who seek to maintain a myth of omniscience and omnicompetence find the fucking hyphen fucked me up because I'm dyslexic. Find difficult. Again, no mention of Donald Trump's authoritarianism at all. Or Joe Biden, for that matters, authoritarianism in regards to COVID policy. You know what is authoritarian? Saying, hey, you want to send your kid to school? Well, 89% of kids in the United States of America have had COVID at least one time. And a lot of them now have long COVID. That's authoritarian. Saying, if you don't send your kid to school, we're going to send police to your house and throw you in jail and take your kid away. Unless you send your child to go get a disease in a poorly ventilated prison-style situation. That's authoritarianism. Oh, by the way, you don't have health insurance. Good luck with that. That's authoritarianism. If you ask me, what's more authoritarian? Hey, take 3 months off, chill at home, catch up on Netflix, maybe get a new hobby, all your food, all your medicine, your rent, everything's paid for, it's all good. Or, go to school, or else you'll go to jail, or your parents will go to jail, and then catch a debilitating lifelong illness that's going to affect you forever. Oh, by the way, you're 14 and you don't even know any better? What's more authoritarian? Mandatory medical experimentation via forced reinfection of a deadly disease? Or staying at home and watching YouTube videos? There are other difficulties. In the early 1960s, an estimated 40 million Chinese starved to death, in a large part, this is just Chinese history, revisionist garbage. But again, this is, I just thought that this would be an interesting segment. It's the apex of two different kinds of propaganda campaigns, and Isabel Hilton is wrong on both propaganda campaigns. Now again, China's government's not perfect. Saying I prefer China's government to the United States government in most instances doesn't mean it's perfect. China is an extremely bigoted government. It's an extremely homophobic government, transphobic government, racist government, genocidal government. But I'd say it's less genocidal than the United States. But hey, I would say the United States is probably also less transphobic and homophobic on average than China's government. So we're allowed to pick and choose which countries' systems are better on which issues. COVID, China's government, far and away, much better. Social issues, China's government, garbage. And in doing this, what we are doing is we are crafting our idealized form of government. A government that cares about your health but doesn't want to send you to a concentration camp because your parents happen to be born in the wrong country or culture. A government that cares about your health, but doesn't want to shoot you dead in the street for violating certain kinds of laws. A government that cares about your health, but doesn't send police officers to roam through town to beat the shit out of people. Anyone that they misconstrue as a protester, even if they're not a protester, they can still beat the shit out of you. Oh, wait, no, that's actually the United States, too. So I'm just saying, you know, this idea of China's either good or bad, or COVID's either real or fake, as a species, I think we can do better. But I don't think we will. So, anyway, there you go.